on the World Trade Center was an assault by political Islamism on American power, and on what the Islamists believe was the destructive force that drove that power: radical individualism. When the World Trade Center towers collapsed, everyone knew that everything had changed. But then it didn't. The system returned to normal. And the heroic individual who did this, and who bent history to his will, was Alan Greenspan. And he became the most powerful man in the world.
As we struggle to make sense of our profound loss and its immediate consequences for the economy, we must not lose sight of our longer-run prospects, which have not been significantly diminished by these terrible events.
But it started badly. A week after the attacks, the American markets opened again. Dealers waited to see what would happen.
Our heroes will now open the marketplace, the green button.
It was a disaster. Immediately, the market suffered the largest fall ever in its history. Two weeks later, the Enron scandal was revealed. And it quickly became clear that it was only one example of a vast corporate fraud. Since the early 90s, many major corporations had faked profits and hidden their debts, helped by some of the major accounting firms. It seemed as if the American economy might collapse. Greenspan took action. He dramatically cut interest rates again and again. His aim was simple: to encourage American consumers to borrow and spend. They and their desires were going to be the machine that stabilized the system.
Well, Hugh, today's rate cut is the culmination of an extraordinary few days for central banks. It's all part of a concerted global effort to bolster consumer confidence and make sure those consumers carry on spending money, because that is what's keeping economies afloat at the moment.
It was an enormous risk. By cutting the rates to almost zero, Greenspan was unleashing a flood of cheap money into the economy. And in the past, this had always led to inflation and dangerous instability. But this time it didn't. A vast consumer boom began, bigger than anything ever before in history. But there was no inflation. Everything remained stable. It seemed that the system could manage itself without direct political control. But it was an illusion. The reason for the extraordinary boom was the very opposite. It happened because of a giant exercise of political power by an elite thousands of miles away on the other side of the world. The Asian countries, led by China, had decided that never again would they put themselves at the mercy of America and its financial elites, as had happened 2 years before. So the Chinese Politburo created a system to manage America. They deliberately held their currency's exchange rate at a low level. This meant that their exports were cheap, and Chinese goods flooded into America. And to pay for them, American dollars flooded into China. But instead of spending the money on their population, the Chinese leaders immediately lent the money back to America by buying government bonds. It was a perfect system of cheap goods and cheap money flowing into America, all controlled by the Chinese Politburo. And it was this that created the stability. From it came an orgy of lending by the banks to the poorest and least creditworthy borrowers in the United States. It was a mirror image of what the West had done in East Asia in the 1990s. And just like then, out of it came a vast property bubble. It is as if over $1 trillion has been recycled, wrote one economist, to a third world developing economy that exists within America's own borders. Chinese money had led America into a dream world. But the reason that so few bankers and politicians questioned it was because of their faith in computers. They were convinced that it was the computers that had brought the stability to the system. The machines created mathematical models that parcelled out the loans and then hedged and balanced them so that there was no risk. But then, in 2008, that dream collapsed. Alan Greenspan's vision of a new planet and Gordon Brown's promise of no more boom and bust were revealed to be fantasies, built on a wave of financial speculation. That speculation had happened because those running the financial sectors, in America and Britain, had promised that they could create a new kind of market democracy that would be stable. But again and again it had led to the opposite: chaos and instability around the world. And now, finally, that had happened in the very heart of the West. But yet again, just as in Southeast Asia 10 years before, those running the financial sector now mobilise political power to rescue themselves and protect their supremacy. They asked the politicians to bail them out, and they agreed. And again, just as in Southeast Asia, the price is being paid by the ordinary people of the countries. And we are now living through a very strange moment. We know that the idea of market stability has failed, but we cannot imagine any alternative. The original promise of the Californian ideology was that the computers would liberate us from all the old forms of political control, and we would become Randian heroes in control of our own destiny. Instead, today, we feel the opposite, that we are helpless components in a global system, a system that is controlled by a rigid logic that we are powerless to challenge or to change.